A school teacher downsized to a 2-bedroom, 2-story home for $500,000 in Dovercourt Village, but maybe it's not what it's made out to be. I'm Michael Ouzas. I'm a realtor here in the Greater Toronto Area. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you think that downsizing into a 2-bedroom property for $500,000 or less is possible. If you ever want to book a call with me, click on that first link in the description down below to discuss what's been happening on the ground level in the Toronto real estate market. Every once in a while, these articles come out on how someone was able to downsize or upsize and get what seems like the deal of the century, but are they exactly what's made out to be? For this article that we're going to break down today is how a school teacher was able to get a 2-story, 2-bedroom home for $500,000 in today's Toronto real estate market. If you ever spent any time on MLS, Realtor.ca to take a look at what $500,000 gets you, in general, for the most part, you'd be looking at a studio or possibly a small 1-bedroom condo without parking in some of the most desirable areas of the city. The question is, how do they do it? And the answer is a Laneway suite. If you're able to watch my last video, which talked about the missing middle, this is an example of how something like a Laneway suite does have potential to make housing more affordable. However, in general, that is typically not the case. How was someone able to downsize into a 2-bedroom property for $500,000? Well, if you read the article, the answer is they built it themselves on their own property. If we go down here, and this is how it looks. I mean, these laneway suites are pretty impressive. Essentially, a laneway in the city of Toronto is where the lane goes behind the homes and you can park at the back of the properties. Looking at this photo, there's a garage here, a garage here. So this could be used as parking or even storage. But then you do see something like this that comes up, and this is a 2-story, 2-bedroom home. It's very modern and provides a pretty nice living setup. If we look at the history of this property, they bought this house back in 2006 with the help of her parents and spent the next 15 years renting the place out to a series of roommates with the goal of saving money to raise a family. Life plans changed, and the owner was investing all time and money into a large house, which she only used a third of the space. She pondered selling and then buying a smaller home like a condo, but that would mean leaving her beloved Dovercourt Village and paying expensive fees. Next up, she thought about transforming her garage into a secondary apartment. There's a lot of red tape involved. In 2018, to alleviate the housing shortage, city started making it easier to construct laneway suites. In 2020, she met with architecture firm Landscape, which we'll discuss in a second. The company charted out her project, and then they got to building. Let's take a look at how this property looks. Here's the kitchen, very modern, looks great, and there's nice flooring, plenty of space here for a dining table. And then looking at the living room, this has nice floors here and a really nice aesthetic. And then this is how it looks from a living area standpoint. And one thing you'll notice with these laneway suites, of course, because they're new, they are quite modern and look really good, very spacious. Essentially, it feels like a loft style condo. They are unique, and people are starting to get creative with things like storage. Here's a look at the powder room with a really funky wallpaper and maybe the world's smallest vanity, but it works. And then here's the bathroom, which also looks fantastic. Really think the aesthetic is really well done, and this build out looks quite great. And there's also even a walk-in closet with stacked washer and dryer, and a bonus, a crafts room, which could also be a second bedroom, of course. You might be wondering, what does the process look like if you are looking to create a laneway suite, and what does it cost? Well, if you look at this article, it does mention that the owner spent $500,000 to build this project. If you go to the City of Toronto's website, there are plenty of considerations to take into account if you are looking to create a secondary property on your property. You'll have to get in touch with city planning and the urban forestry staff to discuss how the design suite can be accomplished to protect the healthy trees if there are any in question. You also need a site plan, which is a survey or site plan showing property lines, lot area, right of way, or easements. Easements, for example, could be maybe Bell Canada needs access to service lines and things like that. Location of existing proposed buildings, overall dimensions, setbacks. So a setback, if your property line, let's say you're 20 feet wide, you may need to leave some space on each side of the laneway property. And summary of permitted proposed zoning provisions to include lot area, building area, coverage, grade elevations to confirm height, and any parking that's needed as well. So that's your first step to get the site plan done. And then you'll also need grading plan, floor plans, a roof plan, any kind of elevations. So what the slopes look like, where the windows are, window heights, and different things like that. And all the sections, which could include any footings, any kind of flooring, foundations, all those little things. Now, it does go without saying, you're most likely going to want to involve an architect and structural engineer when it comes to creating a secondary suite on your property. And there's also mechanical, plumbing, and electrical considerations as well. The next piece is, what does this cost? Well, the city of Toronto does not make it very easy to figure this out. However, when you do click around and see what a residential unit fee is, this is $52.08 per unit. Now, it might sound great. That's not too expensive, $52.08. Well, that's actually per square meters. And I'm not sure if you've heard me talking or anyone talking about real estate. In Toronto, we typically go by square feet. So you want to do a bit of a calculation here on what square meters would look like. And generally it's about 9 to 1. For every, for example, 3x3 space, you're looking at about $52. If we want to use easy math, if you're looking at a 1,000 square foot unit, which is about 500 on the lower level, 500 on the upper level, then that's about 92 meters. 92 times 52, you're looking at around $5,000 just to get the residential unit fee. There's also a $17 per square meter for the single family dwelling, semi-townhouses, duplexes, live-work units, another $8.59 for certification of plans, another $14.56 for permits of certified plans, and all other multiple unit buildings and any other residential occupancies, $17.16 per square meter. This is looking around $10,000 for just the permit process to get going on this project. The next piece is to add in some development charges. And this is where, as part of the Laneway and Garden Suites initiative, the city launched the Development Charges Deferral Program for Ancillary Secondary Dwelling Units Program to encourage eligible property owners to develop secondary laneway suites. If we take a look at the timelines, this says 15 to 20 days. And I clicked around on the website, but wasn't able to find any exact numbers. In that Toronto Life article, they referenced a website called Lanescape, and it's an awesome website, tons of incredible information. The other website we will discuss in a second is Laneway Housing Advisors. Those are the two, I would say, websites that have quite a significant amount of information when it comes to making any of these plans and ideas. In fact, you can contact these companies and they will create some reports on whether or not a laneway is even possible for your property. Really awesome resource. If you go to their website and click on company and then under blog, you'll find this, the dynamics of laneway and garden suite pricing. It's an amazing article. It does talk about pricing factors to consider. And it says most property owners have never taken on a construction project as substantial as building a laneway or garden suite. Even seasoned developers and real estate investors are often taken aback by the intricacies inherent in these kinds of projects. When it comes to understanding pricing, numerous factors come into play that warrant attention. Go through this article. If you are considering building a laneway suite, definitely a must-read article in depth. It talks about geographic location and site context. It also talks about construction costs, which vary from city to city. And it says, be mindful of receiving estimates for laneway and garden suites because inexperienced builders often underestimate the intricate nature of laneway and garden suite construction, resulting in initial quotes that fail to encompass hidden costs. They do discuss an element of dollar per square foot estimates, and they go on to mention that while it's important to consider overall square footage of the building, smaller buildings will have higher cost per square foot compared to larger buildings because they can't take advantage of economies of scale. So for example, if you have a larger building and maybe you have 2 or 3 bathrooms, the plumber will come and service all 3 at the same time. The tiler will do all 3 at the same time. And typically that makes it cheaper. Whereas if you have 1 bathroom, for example, bringing someone in to do just 1 bathroom versus 3 bathrooms, typically a lot of the cost is getting them there in the first place. Anytime you have more than 1 project for a certain trade at the same time on the same property, generally will result in a better per square footage cost because it's less of a cost to redo it later because then they're already there and they can generally give you a better cost to do the entire project. It does go on to say that when comparing square foot cost estimates, really important to know if cost estimates include items like management fees, HST, utility upgrades, connections, landscaping. These costs are often left out by builders during the sales process, but account for a significant portion of the overall project. I can speak from experience that even if changing out something as simple as an electrical panel, you will need to get the city involved to shut down the hydro connection to your property, which is a couple $100s. And if you want to relocate the panel, that's another several $100s on top of that just to make the move from one area to the other. So everything costs a little bit extra than anticipated. At the time of writing, and this was on June 5th, 2024, historical data for projects in Toronto built by Lanescape and other builders, projects that were between 1,000 and 1,500 square feet cost about $400 to $500 per square foot plus a HST to build. If we look at that original article in a 2-bedroom Laneway suite, they mentioned that it cost them $500,000. If it was 1,000 square feet at $500 per square foot, that is about the $500,000 mark plus HST. On the other hand, projects that were under 950 square feet cost 600 to 650 square feet plus HST to build. They did mention this is based on limited data at the time of writing and do not include allowances for contingencies, builder's risk insurance, service connections through the existing house, upgrading incoming services, appliances, window coverings, landscaping, etc. The next piece that it does mention is that Laneway and garden suites present attractive income generating opportunities with rental incomes often exceeding $5,000 per month in desirable neighborhoods. And this is true. Some of these properties do generate quite a bit of rent depending on what it is. I have seen anywhere from about $2,600 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1-floor Laneway suite to all the way up in the $6,000 to $7,000 range for full-on 2-story properties, much like the ones that we just saw, which have more of a house feel to them. On the Laneway Housing Advisor site, and this was Mississauga, has released pre-approved garden suite plans. And the garden suite's a little bit different than a Laneway suite because this seems to be just something that you can add to your current house to add another dwelling unit. Whereas a Laneway, of course, you will need a Laneway to build the property. So if you do have a Laneway, that's where the Laneway suite comes into play. But these are some prefab construction, and it shows a 1-bedroom unit, 32 wide by 18 deep. So you do need quite a sizable lot to build something like this. And if you are keeping in mind what that looks like from a square footage basis, that's about 600 square feet for a 1-bedroom property. The last piece we'll talk about is, will this make housing more affordable, and who will it make it more affordable for? While discussing the rental numbers, as mentioned, that anywhere from $2,600 to $6,000, $7,000 for rent per month isn't exactly adding any kind of affordability for renters when looking to rent a Laneway suite. And it's understandable if someone is going to take the risk to provide that capital to build one of these Laneway suites, they will most likely want to try and recoup that initial cost, which is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to build the property. The next part of the equation is if these properties are able to be sold after being built and whether or not the lot can get severed. So now you can have a property that you can sell just like you would if you were trying to sell the full house. What that looks like from a selling standpoint, and does it make sense, or would it be affordable for the next buyer? Well, if it costs $500,000 to build a 1,000 square foot property, your average price per square foot, if it's $500 a square foot, is significantly cheaper than something like a condo at $1,000 a square foot currently on the resale market. However, once you factor in the time that it takes to build, the time to carry that mortgage, or the time to carry the cost if you are using something, for example, like a line of credit, the delays and the time for construction, any kind of taxes, permits, all those costs will eventually get passed on to the buyer through a higher price point. So if someone's building for $500,000, I find it highly unlikely they will resell it to the next person for $500,000, especially when it looks ultra modern and super up to date. This is where it will be interesting to see if these properties become more desirable than condos in great locations, and if it is kind of that interim between someone purchasing the house, because a 3-bedroom house in that area will be going for in and around $2 million if it's a detached property, whereas a Laneway suite will get you into the area, albeit a smaller house or a Laneway house, for significantly less or possibly even half of that purchase price for the entire house. This will all remain to be seen. The other factor that I don't think is getting considered enough is that if somebody adds one of these properties to the back of their house, they are significantly increasing the value of their current house. So if that house was $2 million without the Laneway suite, if you factor in the Laneway suite as the upside of the house, extra storage, extra income, that value of that home will increase significantly. And I'd argue it'd be somewhere around 1-to-1. So if someone put in $500,000, I do think it will increase the value of the home by about the same, given that there is significant potential for that property on that land itself. And the last consideration is the next buyer for that property. Would they want the Laneway suite altogether on the property? And is that value that's built onto the land, would it be something that they're even interested in if they want, for example, more backyard space for their family, or just more backyard space in general, even something like parking? That was a lot to unpack there on the Laneway suites, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below on where are we headed, and is that missing middle something that will really play a difference when it comes to affordability, or even would it play a difference on what are buyers looking for in the future to get into these great areas? Is this something you'd be interested in? I'm Mike Ouzas. Thanks for watching.